Gold light trembled across the supper table at Wycliffe Palace, catching crystal glasses, silver knives, and the painted faces of dead dukes staring down from the walls. Every portrait was male. Every smile seemed carved from the same command: continue the name. Duke Cassian Wycliffe sat beneath his father's likeness, clean-shaven, broad-shouldered, and perfectly still while 12 gentlemen discussed his future as though he were absent. At 34 he possessed fertile valleys, 6 villages, and a palace large enough to make loneliness appear magnificent. What he did not possess was a wife, or the son his father had taught him to consider his only meaningful legacy. The last Wycliffe, Lord Garrick Vane announced, turning his wineglass between elegant fingers. A mighty oak with no branch. Laughter moved around the table. Cassian's jaw tightened. Garrick was his cousin, 3 years older in manner if not in age, and nearest in the male line should Cassian die without an heir. He disguised appetite as amusement so gracefully that few men noticed when one became the other. Choose your next insult carefully, Cassian said. Not an insult. A remedy. Garrick leaned forward. The Fenwick women have produced sons for 7 generations. Marry Lady Elara Fenwick, and I wager she gives you more boys than this table can toast. Another lord laughed. And if she does not? Garrick's gaze rested upon Cassian. Then perhaps Providence has chosen another branch. The room quieted. Cassian heard his father's voice from years before. A duke may lose money, affection, even honor. He must never lose the bloodline. I accept, Cassian said. Behind the half-closed library door, Elara Fenwick stopped breathing. She had accompanied her parents to the palace believing they were negotiating relief from their debts. Instead, she heard her life reduced to a wager between men with full glasses and empty consciences. She slipped away before anyone saw her, carrying those words home like soot upon her skin. 3 days later, Cassian's carriage crossed the weed-choked drive of Fenwick Hall. Once white pillars had gone gray, rain entered through a cracked roof, 2 footmen performed the work of 10. Elara waited in the drawing-room wearing a mended blue gown, her dark hair pinned without jewels. Poverty had diminished the house, not her composure. Cassian presented his proposal before both families. Upon marriage, every Fenwick debt will be cleared. Your siblings' education and your parents' residence will be secured. Elara studied him. He was handsome in the severe fashion of statues, but nothing in his face suggested he understood the cost of what he offered. And what do you require from me? Her father shifted uneasily. Cassian answered, you would become Duchess of Wycliffe. That is what I would be called. I asked what I would become. Silence tightened the room. Elara rose. I heard your wager. I will not be a decorated cradle in a ducal palace. Her mother gasped. Cassian's pride flared, yet beneath it stirred an unwilling respect. No woman had rejected him publicly, fewer still had done so without trembling. Many would welcome what you refuse, he said. Then marry one of them. He departed without another word. That evening, Elara found her parents surrounded by foreclosure notices. Her father confessed that Garrick controlled the loans and could demand repayment within the month. Her mother spoke of Elara's younger brother being removed from school, her sister losing her medicine, and servants who would leave without wages or homes. We are not asking you to love him, her mother whispered. Only to save us. The cruelty lay not in the command but in the frightened faces waiting behind it. Elara understood that refusal would preserve her freedom by purchasing everyone else's ruin. At dawn, she wrote Cassian one sentence. Clear the debts before the wedding, and I shall keep my family from your consequences. He agreed. Their wedding filled Wycliffe Chapel with lilies, candlelight, and strangers eager to inspect the bride famed for sons she had not conceived. When Garrick raised his glass toward Cassian during the feast, Elara saw triumph pass between them. Cassian noticed her watching. For one uncertain second, shame entered his eyes, then pride shut the door. That night, Elara stood beneath a canopy embroidered with golden wolves. She removed her diamonds one by one while Cassian remained near the hearth. Did you marry me for anything that belongs to me, she asked, or only for what you expect my body to provide? He offered no comforting lie. And if I bear daughters? His expression hardened against a fear older than their marriage. At the doorway, he delivered the sentence that would remain between them long after the candles died. You were meant to bear me sons. When he left, Elara placed the diamonds inside their box. She could not undo the vows, but she could refuse to vanish inside them. Across the palace, Garrick met Lady Octavia beneath the portrait of Cassian's supposedly dead sister. He unfolded the Fenwick loan papers and smiled. The wager has begun. If Elara fails, Cassian will destroy her himself, and everything will belong to us. Wycliffe Palace gave Elara everything except a life that belonged to her. Each morning, maids fastened her into silk gowns chosen by Lady Octavia. Jewels waited in velvet boxes. Fresh flowers appeared before the previous arrangements wilted. Yet every door opened only into another room where someone measured her usefulness. Cassian remained courteous, distant, and exact. At breakfast he discussed estate matters without asking whether she had slept. At dinner he spoke of the tutors his sons would require, the horses they would ride, and the names they would inherit. He had already chosen Edmund for the eldest and Arthur for the second. And if there is a third? Elara asked one evening. Richard, he replied without looking up. She wondered whether he had ever imagined their faces. In his study she discovered a leather calendar marked with small black crosses. One appeared beside every month of their marriage. No explanation was written, but none was needed. Cassian had transformed waiting into an account book, and her body into an unpaid debt. Lady Octavia tightened the invisible chains. She dismissed Elara's maid for being too familiar, replaced her with a silent attendant, and began opening letters addressed to the Duchess. Meals arrived according to a physician's instructions Elara had never seen. Even her walks were scheduled. At a winter tea, noblewomen studied Elara over porcelain cups. One asked whether the celebrated Fenwick talent for sons had weakened with the family fortune. Another remarked that even prized mares sometimes disappointed their owners. Elara set down her cup. The difference, Lady Bertram, is that mares are spared conversation with those inspecting them. A shocked silence followed. Octavia's fingers whitened around her saucer, but Cassian, standing near the window, almost smiled. That fleeting expression unsettled Elara more than open cruelty. It suggested a man existed beneath the Duke, one capable of recognizing her even while refusing to defend her. She glimpsed him again after a quarry accident injured 4 laborers. Cassian publicly rebuked the foreman for carelessness, then secretly arranged pensions for the families. When violent rain damaged cottages in Eastmere, he rode through the storm and ordered repairs before returning with mud darkening his boots. Why conceal your kindness? Elara asked. A duke should inspire obedience, not gratitude. Perhaps your father taught you that because gratitude cannot be commanded. His gaze sharpened, but he did not dismiss her. Their uneasy truce deepened over estate maps. Cassian intended to build a hunting pavilion beside the northern woods. Elara placed 3 village reports across his plans, showing children walking miles for clean water. Wells do not impress visiting lords, he said. No. They merely keep your tenants alive. The pavilion disappeared from the accounts. Within weeks, masons began digging 3 wells. Cassian never acknowledged that she had persuaded him, yet he started leaving village ledgers upon her desk. One evening, rain trapped them inside a tenant barn during an inspection. Water drummed upon the roof while their horses shifted in the straw. Removed from polished corridors, Cassian seemed younger, almost uncertain. He told her his father had punished tears as though they were treason. When Cassian grieved the infant sister he remembered only through a miniature portrait. The old duke locked the nursery and ordered the boy never to speak her name. Tenderness weakens the hand that guards a bloodline, Cassian recited. Then your father mistook fear for strength. Cassian looked toward the rain, unable to agree, but equally unable to deny it. In spring, Elara fainted beside the breakfast table. The palace physician announced her pregnancy before a roomful of servants, and celebration erupted as if a battle had been won. Cassian caught her before she fell. His hands, usually controlled, trembled around hers. During the following months he visited more often. He asked whether she had eaten, shortened journeys that exhausted her, and commissioned 3 wooden horses after learning she carried triplets. Hope crept into his voice, warming it into something dangerously close to affection. Elara found him arranging the horses inside the nursery. For a heartbeat, she saw the father hidden beneath inherited pride. Would you love a daughter? She asked. His hand stopped. That question will never matter. You cannot know. Fenwick women bear sons. Elara's fragile hope cooled. He had not begun loving her. He was loving 3 imagined boys. Later, Dr. Elias Rowan examined her while assisting the palace physician. His manner was gentle, but concern shadowed his eyes when Lady Octavia demanded certainty about the children. No honest doctor could promise their sex, Elias said. Octavia dismissed him from the chamber. That night she summoned the palace physician, placed a purse beside his instruments, and instructed him to protect the Duke from needless uncertainty. At breakfast, the physician announced that every sign indicated 3 healthy sons. Cassian's guarded face broke into radiant relief. Across the table, Octavia smiled while Elara pressed a hand to the lives moving beneath her heart. She alone noticed the physician would not meet her eyes, and understood that the nursery's 3 empty cradles had already become a terrible judgment waiting to be delivered. The storm arrived before Elara's first cry, rolling over Wycliffe Palace with the sound of distant cannon. Rain struck the windows and silver sheets. Lightning awakened the ancestral portraits, making generations of painted dukes appear to lean toward the bedchamber where their future was being decided. Outside, Cassian paced beneath 3 carved wolves, carrying the wooden horses he had commissioned for his sons. Lady Octavia sat rigidly beside the hearth. Garrick watched the clock, his composure sharpened by anticipation. Then a newborn cried. Cassian stopped. A second voice joined it, thinner but fierce. The third followed moments later, small enough to tremble beneath the thunder yet strong enough to command the corridor. The physician emerged. Rainwater rattled the glass behind him as he lowered his eyes. Her Grace is safe. The children are healthy. Relief loosened Cassian's shoulders. My sons. The physician swallowed. 3 daughters, Your Grace. The wooden horses shifted beneath Cassian's arm. One slipped, struck the marble and broke a painted leg. Inside the chamber, exhaustion had stripped Elara of every defense except love. 3 swaddled infants rested against her white nightdress, their dark heads forming a small living crown. She named the first Rosalie, because the child had announced herself boldly. The second became Beatrice, a blessing Elara would never permit anyone to deny. The quietest she called Hope, because hope was most necessary when least deserved. Cassian entered alone at first. Elara saw expectation die across his face before tenderness could replace it. Octavia followed and looked upon the babies as if someone had placed 3 accusations upon the bed. This cannot be announced, the dowager said. Not yet. They are your granddaughters, Elara replied. They are a humiliation Garrick will carry through every drawing room in England. As though summoned by his name, Garrick appeared at the doorway. The wager will be remembered longer than the birth. People adore a duke's disappointment. Cassian stared at the broken horse in his hand. Shame, inherited fear, and wounded pride gathered behind his silence. Elara lifted Hope toward him. Hold her. The baby opened gray eyes and reached toward the golden embroidery on Cassian's coat. His hand moved an inch. Elara glimpsed the man from the rain-dark barn, the man who had built wells and secretly protected injured workers. Then Garrick gave a quiet, contemptuous laugh. Cassian stepped backward. Please, Elara whispered. Not as an heir. As your child. His expression hardened into the mask his father had taught him to wear. You were meant to bear me sons. The same 6 words crossed the room and destroyed whatever fragile bridge had grown between them. Elara did not weep before him. She drew Hope against her and gathered the other babies closer. Then leave, she said. They will learn love without watching me beg you for it. Cassian obeyed because departure demanded less courage than remaining. Within a week, Octavia altered the birth notice to mention 3 children without naming their sex. Cassian signed an order moving Elara to Briar Cottage, an abandoned servant's house at the far boundary of the estate. He granted a meager allowance and forbade the public use of the ducal name, telling himself distance would silence scandal. The cottage roof leaked, shutters hung crookedly, and nettles surrounded the door. Merchants refused credit after hearing the Duke had discarded his wife. Villagers whispered that daughters born in 3s carried misfortune. Dr. Elias Rowan arrived with milk, tools, and 2 laborers. He repaired the worst holes without requesting permission. Mrs. Nell Doran brought blankets hidden beneath laundry and scolded the damp rooms as though neglect itself might feel ashamed. Elara planted herbs beside the threshold, covered broken walls with books, and turned packing crates into cradles. When rain entered, she placed bowls beneath it. When gossip reached her, she sang louder. The cottage intended as punishment filled with lavender, warm bread, and 3 answering voices. During the baby's blessing, Nell lifted Rosalie and noticed a pale crescent near her shoulder. The same mark appeared upon Beatrice, then Hope. Color drained from the nurse's weathered face. She opened an old trunk and removed a miniature portrait of a dark-haired child wearing the Wycliffe crescent. Elara recognized the girl Cassian believed had died in infancy. Lady Arabella, Nell whispered. I held her when she was 6 years old. Her frightened gaze moved across the triplets. The last Wycliffe daughter carried this mark. They erased her from their history, Your Grace, and now they mean to erase these 3. 4 years softened Briar Cottage without erasing its scars. Ivy covered the cracked stones, herbs crowded the windows, and 3 young pear trees leaned toward the chimney as though listening for laughter. What Cassian had intended as a place of disappearance had become the busiest doorway on his estate. Villagers came for Elara's remedies, advice, and refusal to judge their poverty. Elias taught her which medicines healed and which merely promised healing. In return, she organized bread for widows and lessons for children who worked during daylight. Every evening, small fingers traced letters across slates at her kitchen table. Rosalie, Beatrice, and Hope grew as differently as 3 flames sharing one candle. Rosalie confronted every cruelty directly. When boys mocked her sisters as the Duke's mistakes, she stood between them and demanded the insult be repeated before Elara. The boys fled. Beatrice preferred broken objects to arguments. She repaired clocks, latches, and music boxes by arranging their pieces until hidden patterns became visible. Hope remembered everything: songs after one hearing, conversations whispered rooms away, and promises adults hoped children would forget. Elara never taught them to hate Cassian. She answered questions honestly but without bitterness, saying their father had allowed fear to make him cruel. "Does he know where we live?" Hope asked. "Yes." "Then he is very lost," Rosalie decided. Cassian heard those words from beyond the hawthorn hedge. He had ridden to Briar Cottage intending for once to enter. Instead, he watched the girls place flowers upon a tenant's grave while Elara comforted the widow. Hope later pointed toward the palace towers and called him the Duke who lives beyond the trees. Cassian turned his horse homeward. Their hatred might have justified his absence. Their indifference revealed how thoroughly he had earned it. The reports reaching his study told another story. Garrick claimed Elara squandered her allowance, encouraged disobedience, and used Elias to challenge ducal authority. Lady Octavia warned that the cottage had become a rival court built upon Cassian's humiliation. Meanwhile, estate income vanished through false repairs, invented suppliers, and loans carrying forged signatures. Garrick directed suspicion toward Elara's charities, knowing Cassian's pride would accept any explanation that spared him from examining his own neglect. "Wycliffe requires a wealthy marriage," Garrick said, "unless you prefer surrendering it to 3 daughters raised to despise you." Lady Octavia proposed Lady Vivian Harcourt, whose family fortune could conceal the losses. Cassian agreed to meet her. Vivian was elegant, intelligent, and confident, yet everything she knew about Elara came from Octavia: that Elara had abandoned her duties, attached herself scandalously to Elias, and refused reconciliation. Cassian petitioned for an annulment on grounds of desertion. At the private hearing, Elara entered without jewels, wearing the blue gown she had carefully remade from the dress in which she once rejected him. Cassian noticed the choice. "You left the palace," he said, clinging to the lie required by his petition. "You carried us out of it. You have refused your responsibilities as Duchess. I perform them daily among people you have forgotten." His silence confirmed the wound. Elara removed her wedding ring and placed it between them. "Take my title if paper grants you that power. But I will not help you teach our daughters that their birth was a failure." For one breath, Cassian looked stricken. Then pride rescued him from remorse. He signed the petition. That evening, Beatrice tried repairing a loose hinge in the cottage cupboard. Her screwdriver slipped through a crack where solid wood should have been. With Rosalie pulling and Hope holding the lamp, she removed a concealed panel. Inside lay a miniature portrait of Arabella Wycliffe, several sealed letters, and a ledger dusted with age. Elara opened it beneath the kitchen light. Generations of firstborn daughters had been renamed as sons, recorded as stillborn, or transferred into invented branches so younger males could inherit. The final entry bore Arabella's name. She had been born 2 years before Cassian. Hope stared at the page, then repeated a sentence Lady Octavia had whispered months earlier while passing the cottage. Cassian survived because Arabella learned to remain dead. A knock sounded. Rosalie opened the door to a palace messenger bearing Cassian's wedding invitation. Beneath Lady Vivian's name, Garrick had written a private command: "Bring the girls. Let them watch their father begin again." Elara looked from that cruelty to the ledger of vanished daughters and understood the wedding would not begin a new family. It would bury the rightful one forever. Preparations transformed Wycliffe Palace into a monument to denial. White roses concealed cracked stone, musicians rehearsed beneath portraits of men who had inherited through buried names, and servants polished silver purchased with money the estate no longer possessed. Cassian's marriage to Lady Vivian would appear magnificent because Garrick needed no one to examine what supported it. Vivian's dowry was scheduled to enter the Wycliffe accounts immediately after the vows. Garrick would use it to replace what he had stolen through forged repairs and invented suppliers. Once the theft disappeared, he intended to reveal the altered succession records, challenge Cassian's title, and present himself as the nearest eligible male heir. At Briar Cottage, Elara spread Arabella's letters across the kitchen table. Nell stood beside her, grief hollowing the old nurse's face. She was not an infant when she vanished, Nell said. She was 6. She loved Cassian fiercely, and he followed her everywhere. Lady Octavia had sent Arabella to a distant convent after physicians declared she would survive a childhood fever. Cassian was told his sister had died, while servants were threatened into silence. Arabella's letters begged to return home and warned that the family would erase every daughter born after her. Elias helped Elara search the parish archives. Beneath rotting marriage registers, they found a copy of the original royal charter granting Wycliffe to the eldest legitimate child. It contained no requirement that the heir be male. Rosalie was born first, Elias said. Nell touched Arabella's faded signature and closed her eyes. For 40 years she had carried obedience like guilt. Now the child's surviving words finally gave silence an enemy again. Elara looked toward the garden where her daughters chased falling leaves. She felt no triumph, only anger that a title might recognize Rosalie when her father had refused to do so. At the palace, Vivian began questioning the story she had accepted. Cassian spoke of Elara with defensiveness, never indifference. Octavia refused to show her the family records, while Garrick demanded that her dowry be transferred before the ceremony. Why such urgency? Vivian asked. Because affection should not be delayed by paperwork, Garrick answered. Yet paperwork appears to be the only affection anyone requires from me. That evening, a servant loyal to Nell overheard Garrick ordering men to search Briar Cottage. He sent warning before they arrived. Elara divided the evidence. Rosalie stitched Arabella's final letter inside her rag doll. Beatrice slid a ledger page beneath the cover of an abandoned beehive. Hope watched Elara loosen the binding of her alphabet book and hide the charter within it. Why must truth hide? Hope asked. Because frightened people often attack what they cannot answer. Elara prepared to present the remaining documents at the wedding, where witnesses could prevent their destruction. Before dawn, carriage wheels crushed the herbs outside the cottage. Garrick entered with 2 officers and an accusation of theft. Those records belong to Wycliffe Palace, he said. They belong to the women whose names your family stole. The officers seized Elara. Elias had been called away to treat victims of a carriage accident that Garrick's men had staged. Nell was locked inside the pantry. The triplets escaped through the herb shed and crouched behind the rain barrel while their mother was dragged toward a waiting carriage. Elara saw Rosalie's red ribbon above the leaves. She did not betray their hiding place. Instead, she raised her voice as the officers forced her inside. If they silence me, take the truth where everyone can hear it. Hope repeated the sentence until the carriage disappeared. Rosalie wanted to follow their mother, but Beatrice had noticed black grease upon the wheels and remembered the abandoned pumping station near the river. Hope clutched the alphabet book and insisted they obey Elara first. Their mother had not told them to chase her. She had told them to carry the truth. They freed Nell and began walking toward the palace through lanes crowded with wedding carriages. Near the village bridge, a frightened horse scattered the procession. Nell caught Rosalie and Beatrice, but Hope was swept between guests and vanished beyond the iron gates. Inside Wycliffe Chapel, Cassian waited beside Vivian as the organ began. Then the doors opened. A muddy 4-year-old girl stood alone beneath the towering arch, one shoe missing and Elara's alphabet book pressed against her chest. Hope looked past hundreds of strangers, found the father who had erased her, and began walking toward him with history hidden beneath her small, determined hands. Hope's bare foot made no sound upon the chapel carpet, yet every step seemed louder than the organ. Mud streaked her cream dress. Wind had loosened her dark curls, and the alphabet book shook against her chest, though her gray eyes remained fixed upon the man beside the altar. Cassian recognized her before reason supplied her name. She possessed Elara's delicate features, but the solemn eyes staring back at him were his own. For 4 years he had avoided those eyes. Now they had crossed his palace alone to find him. The organ faltered into silence. Hope stopped several paces away. "Are you marrying another lady because Mama gave you us?" A whisper swept through the nobles. Cassian descended from the altar, each step stripping authority from him. When he knelt, Hope retreated. "You are Hope," he said. "Mama says names matter when people try to forget you." The words struck more cleanly than accusation. Cassian extended one hand, then lowered it when she drew the book closer. "Where is your mother?" "Men took her. But first you sent her away." Garrick emerged from the front pew. The child has been coached. Remove her before this spectacle becomes crueler. Hope looked at Cassian and repeated 6 words with terrible precision. You were meant to bear me sons. Cassian's face emptied. Around him stood the people before whom he had most feared humiliation, yet the shame he felt belonged entirely to what he had done in private. Mama cries when she thinks we sleep, Hope continued. Why are daughters good enough to carry medicine and feed your tenants, but not good enough for you to love? Cassian tried to answer, but no defense survived the sight of her missing shoe. For the first time, he understood that cruelty was not measured by the anger it provoked but by the trust it made impossible. She expected nothing from him, not even truth. Vivian removed her veil. I will not speak another vow until someone answers this child. Lady Octavia rose sharply. You understand nothing about this family. That, Vivian replied, appears to have been everyone's intention. Hope opened the alphabet book. Her fingers found the loosened binding, and she withdrew the royal charter alongside a ledger page bearing Arabella's name. Garrick seized upon the room's confusion. Forgeries, he declared. Elara stole private records and filled this child with lies. The chapel doors opened again. Nell entered holding Rosalie's hand, while Beatrice hurried beside them with one stocking torn. Rosalie carried her doll. Beatrice protected a folded page beneath her coat. Nell faced the altar. Lady Arabella lived 6 years inside this palace. I nursed her through fever. Her name was removed so a son could inherit. Octavia gripped the pew. When Hope displayed Arabella's letter, the dowager recognized the handwriting. Her denial died before she could speak it. Garrick moved toward the side aisle. Elara has already confessed. She is being transported to the magistrate. Beatrice stared at his gloves. Black grease darkened the seams around his fingers. That is pumping grease, she said. Garrick stopped. Beatrice pointed. The men who took Mama had it on their sleeves. Their carriage wheels had it too. Hope's brow tightened as memory arranged itself. One man said, open 3 then 7 then 4. The river will finish everything before noon. Rosalie pulled a creased estate map from inside her doll's dress. Their carriage went toward the old waterworks. Mama showed us the drainage road last spring. Cassian understood with sudden horror. The abandoned pumping station lay beneath the riverbank, where ancient sluice gates controlled water entering the estate channels. Opening the wrong gates together would flood the lower chambers and destroy anything hidden there. Elara is not being taken to court, he said. She is beneath the waterworks. Garrick fled through the servants' passage. Cassian ordered the guards after him, then turned toward the chapel doors. Octavia caught his sleeve. If you leave now, this family will never recover from the scandal. He looked at Hope, Beatrice, and Rosalie, the family his mother meant him to sacrifice. Then let the scandal have the name. He tore the ceremonial sash from his coat and abandoned it upon the floor. Vivian addressed her stunned father. Bring the magistrate. Search Garrick's rooms and stop my dowry transfer. Then she looked at Cassian. Go. If Elara survives, do not mistake rescue for forgiveness. Outside, thunder gathered over the river. Cassian mounted his horse, but Rosalie blocked him before he could ride. You do not know the hidden road, she said. You cannot come. Then you cannot find Mama. Nell placed the girls inside a covered estate cart while Cassian summoned workers. Beatrice carried the map. Hope repeated the gate sequence. Rosalie watched the road, refusing to surrender fear to anyone. The wedding bells began ringing behind them, their joyful peal grotesquely late. Cassian drove toward the blackening river with the 3 daughters he had never held guiding him to the wife he had abandoned. Ahead, the ancient water wheel groaned into motion, and beneath the earth, an iron gate slammed shut. The ancient water wheel turned beneath the swollen river, each rotation sending a shudder through the stone passages below. Elara stood inside the lowest pumping chamber with water circling her ankles. Garrick's men had taken the ledger pages they found, unaware that the charter remained with Hope. Before leaving, they had opened the sluices and lowered an iron barrier across the only doorway. Water climbed the walls with patient certainty. Above ground, Cassian leapt from the cart before it stopped. Elias waited beside several estate workers, having discovered the staged carriage accident and followed the alarm bells. Nell led the triplets into the empty keeper's house, but Rosalie planted herself before the door. The main tunnel is wrong, she said, unfolding Elara's map. Mama marked a drainage passage beside it. Cassian crouched to examine the lines. Show me, he said. Rosalie traced a narrow route toward the lower wheel. Beatrice studied the mechanism sketched beside it. The barrier uses 3 gears, she said. If the wheel turns backward, it can rise. Hope repeated the words overheard near the cottage. 374. The man said the river would finish everything before noon. Elias examined the numbered levers. That is the order. Garrick opened them. We must close them in reverse. For the first time, Cassian did not question how children could know what grown men had missed. He assigned workers to the levers and entered the drainage passage with Elias. The tunnel narrowed until they moved sideways between sweating stones. Water rushed around their boots. From somewhere ahead came the grinding complaint of machinery forced beyond endurance. Elara! Cassian shouted. Her answer reached him through iron and water. Cassian? He found her beyond the barrier, soaked and pale but standing. Relief struck him so sharply that he gripped the bars. The girls are safe. Only then did her composure falter. All three. All three. They found you. A worker shouted that the seventh lever would not move. Beatrice called instructions from above after studying a rusted model in the keeper's house. The smaller gear had to be disengaged before the lever could turn. Elias relayed her words and the machinery lurched. The barrier rose several inches, then stopped. A fractured chain snapped across the passage, dropping another gate behind Cassian and separating him from Elias. Leave, Cassian ordered through the bars. Turn the wheel from above. He crawled beneath the first barrier into Elara's chamber. Water had reached their knees and was rising faster. On a ledge lay one ledger page Garrick's men had overlooked. Cassian pushed it beneath the gate toward Elias. Protect the girls and the evidence. Elara stared at him. Do not make a grand sacrifice and imagine it repairs 4 years. I imagine nothing can. The honesty silenced them more completely than an excuse. Cassian searched the wall and found the counterweight chain jammed behind a broken iron tooth. Releasing it required lifting the damaged mechanism while Elara pulled the chain free. Above, workers strained against the wheel. Rosalie moved among them, repeating that her mother was waiting. Beatrice corrected the alignment whenever the gears slipped. Hope stood beside the numbered levers and called, for closed. 7 closing. 3 must wait. Her perfect memory held the order against panic. Cassian raised the mechanism. Elara pulled until the chain tore loose. The counterweight dropped and the first barrier began climbing. Elias reached beneath it and dragged Elara through. Cassian followed as water surged across the chamber floor. The workers reversed the wheel moments before the stone housing cracked. The river thundered through an empty channel instead of the occupied passage. Outside, Vivian arrived with the magistrate and guards. Documents discovered in Garrick's rooms proved his theft and revealed payments to the men who abducted Elara. Garrick emerged from a maintenance tunnel and ran toward the woods, only to find Vivian waiting beside the guards. My fortune was never your rescue, she told him. It was your hiding place. He was arrested without ceremony. When Elara stepped into daylight, the triplets ran to her. She knelt and gathered them close, pressing her face into their damp curls. Cassian remained several paces away. He had once refused to cross a bedchamber to hold them. Now he understood that crossing the space required their permission. He lowered himself into the mud. I was cruel to your mother and to you. Fear did not force me. Tradition did not force me. I chose it. Rosalie studied him. Are you sorry because I am the heir? No. I am sorry because you were always my daughters. Hope asked, do you still wish we were boys? Cassian looked at 3 faces he should have known through every season of their lives. I wish only that I had become your father sooner. Elara took the girl's hands and walked toward Briar Cottage with Elias and Nell. She did not invite Cassian, but neither did she look away. Left beside the turning river, he understood that saving her life had won him nothing except the chance to begin earning what he had once believed his title guaranteed. The royal judgment arrived beneath a seal older than Wycliffe Palace. Rosalie, as the firstborn triplet, was declared Cassian's lawful heir. Beatrice and Hope received their names within the succession records, alongside protections no future duke could revoke. For the first time in generations, 3 daughters existed on paper exactly as they existed in life. Acknowledged, legitimate, and impossible to erase. The fortune Garrick had built from other families' ruin was sold to repay the villages. Lady Octavia confessed before the court. She had obeyed her husband's command to conceal Arabella, then preserved the lie because admitting it would threaten Cassian's title and expose her own complicity. Cassian removed her authority over Wycliffe but ensured she received modest care away from the estate. Mercy, he had learned, did not require surrendering judgment. Before assembled tenants and servants, Cassian restored Elara's title and withdrew every accusation made during the annulment. Then he placed the estate under trusteeship. "A title gave me power," he said, "but it never proved I deserved it." He ordered the ancestral gallery changed. Portraits of boastful dukes were moved from places of honor, and Arabella's likeness was installed beneath her true name. Nell supplied the names of other forgotten daughters. Empty frames were hung for those whose faces could not be recovered, because absence deserved acknowledgement too. Cassian did not ask Elara to return. He came to Briar Cottage carrying timber instead of flowers. He repaired the broken shutters, cleared the drainage ditch, and restored the 3 wooden horses he had abandoned after the girl's birth. When Elara thanked him, he answered, "This is not payment. There is no payment for what I did." He visited only when invited. Rosalie tested him by demanding the truth even when it embarrassed him. Beatrice made him solve mechanical puzzles before joining her games. Hope required him to repeat every promise and reminded him whenever his actions failed to match it. Cassian learned that Rosalie feared thunder despite confronting grown men, that Beatrice hummed when solving difficult problems, and that Hope disliked endings in which apologies erased consequences. He attended village lessons, repaired tenants' roofs openly, and listened when Elara corrected him before others. Months passed. His humility remained after gossip faded, which mattered more than any public declaration. One autumn evening, Elias joined Elara beside the cottage gate. He admitted that his care for her had grown beyond friendship, but he would not use Cassian's cruelty as an argument for choosing him. Safety offered freely should never become another debt, he said. Elara understood what his kindness had given her: shelter without possession, companionship without demand. Yet gratitude was not the same as the future her heart cautiously desired. She chose Cassian only after recognizing that he no longer asked to be chosen. Elias accepted her answer without bitterness. He became Wycliffe's physician and remained the friend the children trusted whenever adults made life unnecessarily complicated. 1 year after the interrupted wedding, Elara entered Wycliffe Chapel wearing ivory silk without a veil. No foreign ambassadors attended, no dowry changed hands, and no wager waited beneath the vows. Cassian waited without ceremonial gold. The triplets walked with their mother, each carrying part of the family's restored history. Beatrice held Arabella's portrait. Hope carried the original charter. Rosalie bore a volume containing every recovered daughter's name. Before Elara reached the altar, Hope raised her hand. "You must say the old words." The chapel tightened around Cassian's silence. He knelt before his daughters and looked toward Elara. "You were meant to bear me sons," he said, his voice rough with shame. "Those words were cruel because they made love conditional upon something none of you owed me." Hope nodded solemnly. "Now say the true ones." Cassian faced all 4 of them. "You were always meant to be loved." 6 words replaced 6 wounds, not by erasing them, but by honoring the lives that had survived them. Elara offered her hand. "I do not return as the woman you married. I would not ask you to. And our daughters stand between us, never behind us. Always." They renewed their vows with the triplets between them. When the chapel doors opened, the family walked out together rather than following the order prescribed by rank. Their celebration ended at Briar Cottage. Beside the doorway, Cassian, Elara, and the girls planted 3 young trees. Rosalie packed earth around the strongest trunk. Beatrice corrected the angle of the second. Hope tied handwritten names to every branch so no one could forget what had been planted there. Beyond the hill, Wycliffe Palace glowed beneath the evening sky, grand but no longer powerful enough to define them. Cassian had once sent his wife and daughters to the cottage so the world would forget them. Now he chose it as their family home. Elara entered first. The girls called their father from the doorway. Cassian looked once toward the palace, then followed their voices into the warm house. Behind him, 3 young trees moved beneath the wind, and the land that had demanded sons carried his daughters' names into spring.